Hi, my friends. Welcome to the Grow There with Cheria podcast. I went to a small liberal arts Christian college when I was in undergrad. And there's a whole backstory on why I went there, what I studied, but we will save that for another time. And as part of your graduation requirements, you had to go to chapel 3 times a week. That is a lot of chapel, just in case you're wondering. And this one time I was sitting in chapel waiting for it to start, and I see my friend Jessica Barron, whose sister Britt Barron is on this podcast, and she is running around this chapel area, and it looks like she's having fun. And I thought to myself, I don't know what she's doing, but I need to find out. So I grabbed her and I said, Jessica, what are you doing right now? Is this your job? Like, what's happening? And she's like, oh my gosh, it's so funny that you should ask because my job is about to become available and you should apply for it. And it turns out that there was this role, this undergrad chapel programs internship, where you would help to host all the speakers that came onto campus. So I ended up applying, getting the job, and that was my job my junior and senior year. And fun fact, that meant I got paid to go to chapel, which was the best college hack of all time. But I always think about that story because do you ever see people in your life or adjacent to your life, like in on LinkedIn or social media, where you think, I don't know what they're doing, but it looks cool. Like something about your life or what you're doing for your career. Like I'm interested. I want to learn. How'd you get there? What are you doing? I never would have gotten that job if I hadn't stopped Jess and said, what you're doing looks fun. I want to know what it is. And, I got to say, our next guest is someone who I feel the same kind of energy around. I want to be Fran Hauser when I grow up. Fran is one of the most impressive women I know. And part of the reason why she's so impressive to me is because she has really created the world that she lives in. She is a best-selling author. She's a keynote speaker. She's a book coach. And she's a champion of women in the workplace. She's a LinkedIn top voice. She's a true thought leader. She's spoken at over 200 organizations and authored 2 books, The Myth of the Nice Girl and Embrace the Work, Love Your Career. And these are basically modern Bibles for professional women. Um, Her own publishing journey proved to be so rewarding that she created Bookbound, which is a venture dedicated to launching female nonfiction authors. She is a former Fortune 500 executive and still today is a startup investor who's invested in over 40 female founded companies. She's been featured everywhere: Fortune, CNBC, Fast Company, Cosmopolitan, Women's Health, Business Insider, and so many more. She is remarkable, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. So, without further ado, it's time for us to grow there with Fran Hauser. Okay. Oh my goodness, Fran. I'm so happy to see you. I know it's like we hop in the room and then we hop in the room the second time to start recording, but I just feel like so excited to see your face and so
Me
blessed
too.
that you said yes to this conversation today.
Oh
How
my
are
god.
you?
Anything for you. I know lots of hopping. Lots of hopping.
Oh, so
But no,
much hopping.
I'm doing great, and I'm just so happy to be here with you today.
Oh my gosh, Fran, I feel like one of the little miracles of 2020, is it 2022 or 2021 when I met you? I can't remember. Maybe 2021. I don't know. But it was like a little moment in my life where I thought the fact that I got to connect to you was one of the most meaningful moments in that year. I remember like going through whatever year it was. I always do a year in review. And I think about the new people that I got to encounter. And you were on that list because not only are you amazing and, the bumper of this podcast says all your accolades, but it's just how you show up in the world is so genuine and beautiful and kind that I just remember after after we met thinking, "Oh my gosh, I hope that I can stay connected to her." And I'm so grateful that we have stayed connected and you've been such a meaningful part of my journey. So thank you.
Well, I feel the same, and I am very happy that we've stayed connected because it's very easy to lose touch.
Yeah.
You have to prioritize and
Yeah.
say intentionally, like, this is someone that I want in my life. And so I'm just so happy that we've been there for each other over the last few years.
Mm.
And it's been so fun to watch you in this next chapter of your career and in building this platform. I'm just so excited for you.
No.
It's just great to see now the podcast as a part
Mm.
of this bigger platform. So thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. Well, thanks so much, Fran. And you know why we're here, but for anyone who's maybe listening in for the first time, I'll just say, there's two reasons why I wanted to start this podcast. The first is that I'm just personally drawn to all things related to growth. And I see you as one of these people as well, just constantly growing and evolving in a way that feels like you're living more and more into who you want to be and who you're meant to be. Um, and the second reason is because as I've looked at the ways that I've grown and the ways that I see other people grow, I have always noticed that there is sort of um, this through line where some of the most rapid points of growth happen when work and life intersect. And it's not just one or the other. And it can be, something in your personal life impacts your professional life or vice versa. Or it's just there's so many things happening at once that you 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 kind of start this sprint of growth in your life. And it maybe doesn't always feel great in the beginning, but in the
Right.
end, you look back and you think, wow, look how far I've come as a result of those challenges or those opportunities. So, you know that we're here to hear a story from you about a time in your life where something, in your personal life impacted your professional life or vice versa. And, I just want you to share whatever comes to mind and then we'll kind of unpack it. So, I'll leave it to you to take it away.
Amazing. So, the story, and the experience that just really quickly pops into my head when we're talking about, seasons of change and, how personal and professional, how, they can kind of impact each other. And, um, the there was a big moment for me when my husband and I started our family, and just to give context, my boys are 14 and 12 now. So we're really talking, like, we're going back 14 years, and,
Yeah.
I was in this big corporate job. I was working at Time Inc. I was the president of digital.
Mm.
It was really demanding, and there were many days where I would get home and my babies would, be sleeping.
Yeah.
And it was such a horrible feeling. And I remember, like, very clearly having this moment of questioning, questioning, like, what am I doing? My husband
Yeah.
and I worked so hard to create our family. We adopted both of our boys at birth.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and it just felt like it was something that we both wanted so badly. And now that we had it, um, I was having a really hard time kind of having my professional and my personal life work together. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, in a
Yeah.
way where I felt really good about the amount of time that I'm spending with my family. And so it was like this big question for me, and like, what am I going to do about it? And I kind of like took a step back and I thought about, in my role as president of digital, the best part of my job was meeting with startup founders. And,
Mhm.
it's because I worked in digital. Like, even though this was a big legacy media company, the biggest magazine publisher in the world, I was working on the innovation side. I was
Yeah.
in digital, which meant I got to meet all these really cool founders that were launching new things. and talk to
Yeah.
them about how we might partner. So, I'm going way back here, but, Flipboard and, Pop
Mm.
Sugar and,
Yeah.
what Dial Feeder, like, all of, like, these new, companies and that were disrupting, like, really
Mm.
disrupting, very, like, big ways. And so I loved that part of my job, and I started wondering if my next chapter might be in the startup world. And, I kind of started seeing myself as a startup investor, a startup advisor. And um, what I decided to do was actually start investing and advising as a side hustle while I was at time, because I wanted to make sure that I really enjoyed the work and that it was
Mm.
something that I wanted to go like all in on. And it was a little tricky. I had to have our general counsel had to approve every single company that I became, involved with. But
Sure.
I really loved it. And like I had so many incredible experiences, like Jen Hyman and Jenny Fleiss, the co-founders of Run the Runway. They came
Yeah.
to see me before they even launched the business. They
Wow.
just wanted my advice. And I ended up connecting them with their lead investor. Like, I connected them
Mm.
with the VC firm that ended up leading their fundraising round, and they taught Jen and
Wow.
Jenny talk about how pivotal that experience was for them. It's in their Harvard case study, the
Wow.
experience of meeting me and then my making that connection, and
Right.
so those were the types of things that I was doing and, like, just, like, really feeling like I was creating an enormous amount of value for these companies, for
Mm.
these startups, um, and I did it as a side hustle for 2 years, startup
Wow.
investing, advising, and, um, and then just realized I really like this, and even though it was really
Mm.
scary, I decided that I was gonna leave corporate after so many, many, many years and
Yeah.
put up a shingle and go out on my own, which was so
Wow.
scary, and I
So
have to tell
scary.
you, so scary, and I remember there were people at the company at time, and also people in the industry that were questioning me, and they were saying things like,
Mm.
"Are you settling? Like, are you're
Mm.
taking us back?" And, they a lot of them really felt that that I was a future CEO, that,
Mm.
that I could have gotten to that level if I had wanted to. So,
Sure.
it was a really big decision, and the one thing that I'll say too is that obviously that was an enormous change in my life, and it
Yeah.
did create, so much space and capacity for me to be with my family more, which is, really
Mm.
what I wanted, while also working on really interesting things. I
Yeah.
was able to do both of those things, but the thing that I wasn't expecting is that it gave me the space to finally write the book that I had been wanting
Yeah.
to write for so many years that when I
Mm.
was in corporate, there was no way that I could make time to write a book. It was a women's leadership
Yeah.
book. First book, The Myth of the Nice Girl, came out in 2018. And Cheria, I have to tell you that that book ended up launching this whole thought leadership platform for me.
Mm.
It launched a
Yeah.
speaking practice and then wrote a second book. So what's so interesting about this is that I think, like, kind of the moral of the story is that when I decided to make that move to leave corporate, to go to work on my own, a lot of people saw that as you're taking a step back, you're
Mm.
settling, you're not realizing your full potential, you're throwing in the towel. When in
Mm.
fact, what that move did was it ended up creating so many opportunities for me. So not
Yeah.
only did it check the box in terms of what I wanted, the kind of mother that I wanted to be, and what I
Mhm.
wanted my family dynamics to look like, it checked the box for that, but it also created all of these, like, new professional opportunities, that I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop there.
It's just it's so good and there's so much to unpack in here. I I want to start with kind of the big question, which is if you were to summarize what the growth was that took place
Mhm.
in you as a result, when you looked back and you could say, I the ways that I grew were A, B, and C? What would those
Yeah.
be?
Oh, such a good question. Um, I I believe the biggest growth was in, um, really believing that I could do it on my own, that I
Mm,
didn't need to be attached to a big brand or like People Magazine, which was one of the big
yeah.
brands that I worked on, or Time Inc., but that it was enough to be Fran Hauser and
Oh,
that I could. Right, but that I really remember that because that's what I was scared about. When I was leaving, my fear was, I know that right now I could pick up the phone and get a call back from anybody because of what I am attached to. I'm attached to these
mm,
big media brands. I'm attached to this big company, right?
yeah.
But when I leave, I'm not attached to any of that.
Oh,
When I pick up
yeah.
the phone, it's Fran Hauser. And like
Yeah.
really the growth, I think, just came in believing in myself that I was enough, that
Yeah.
not only was I enough, but that I could create an enormous amount of value and impact, um, on my own and building my own
Yeah.
thing. And so I think that there was huge growth there. And there was
Mm,
also just it just felt so rewarding and fulfilling, like
mm,
creating a book from scratch, from a
mhm.
blank screen, 60,000 words, and learning how to be vulnerable throughout that process. Like, I was
Yeah.
learning again. My editor, it was so fun to, like, have somebody who was pushing me and saying
Mm,
that, because like, at Time Inc., I'd gotten to a level where I was I was in the C-suite.
yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
getting a lot of feedback at that point. And now to be working on this book where I have an editor telling me, "You're not being vulnerable enough, and you're not
Mhm,
the book isn't relatable because you're leaning too much into research and other people's story.
mhm.
Share your own story." So, I just felt like that was, like, such from a growth perspective, I just learned
Yeah.
so much throughout that process.
Ugh, it's so good. There's, 2 things that just popped into my mind while you were saying that. One is, and we've talked about this a little bit, um, I because as you know, I've been working on my own book, and what I feel the 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 experience of writing a book is so much about self-actualization to me. It's really living into and pouring yourself into these pages and allowing yourself to grow in the process and allow yourself to become in the process. And when you're saying to really step in and own that you are Fran Hauser and that is enough, it's so powerful because so many of us, and this goes to kind of the second thing I was thinking is we are attached to these things that we think make us who we are. We think that that job and that career defines us in some way, but it really is an illusion. But when we take these steps into towards self-actualization, where the critics might on the outside say, what are you doing? Why would you do this? Really, what you're saying, I think, is, well, I'm going to liberate myself. And I don't know what's on the other side of that. But what I
Mhm.
do know is it's all me. And I remember when I launched this business, when I launched Grow There, a couple months in, I was invited to come and speak on a panel for Fortune's Most Powerful Women. And I'm in this room of these powerhouses. And I'm sitting there with my little bitty business that just started 2 months ago. And I remember feeling like I missed my corporate job. I missed being able to stand up and say, I'm the VP at this place
Mhm.
versus I'm the founder of Grow There. It felt so insignificant and so
Mhm.
vulnerable to
Mhm.
stand up and say, like, I am Cheria and this is my business and I am walking firmly in that. It's so vulnerable, but it is the beginning. I think it is the beginning of self actualization, which kind of weaves in both those things you're saying.
I just, last night I was listening to a podcast, about the importance of creating a professional introduction, like, so when you introduce
Mhm.
yourself, right, you wanna be able to introduce yourself, um,
Yeah.
very concisely. You wanna make sure you're using, like, the most important keywords. What do you want
Right.
people to remember about you? And it got me thinking along the lines of what you just said, how much easier it was to introduce myself when I was the president of digital at time.
Yeah.
For you, when
Yes.
you were the VP of fill in the
Mhm.
blank at
Yeah.
blank, right?
Mhm.
It it's it just feels so much more comfortable, or when
Yeah.
I worked at Coca-Cola or when I worked at Ernst& and Young or when like,
Yeah.
what right? So, but then all of a sudden, it's like you're out on your own,
Mhm.
and it it definitely takes a lot. I can't tell you for how long I would introduce myself by saying, "I'm the former president of digital
Yep. Yep.
at timing,"
Yeah.
right? Or
I
or
understand
I'm an
why.
right? Or I'm a media executive turned startup investor, or
Mhm.
I was holding on to that as a
Yeah.
crutch for so long. And the
Yeah.
self-actualization, I do think a big part of that is, like, being able to let go of it and being
Absolutely.
able to introduce yourself in a way that's really authentic and aligned to, like,
Yeah.
how you're spending your day and what you
Yeah.
care about.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's really I think it's something that I've recognized as the bravest thing I've ever done is to own my name, really to say, "I'm Cheria." This podcast is called Grow There with Cheria. I'm really trying to embrace that I'm just out here in these streets trying to self-actualize and and
Yeah.
honestly inspire other
Well,
people to do that same thing, whether you stay working in corporate America or you go and do your own thing. We all, at the end of the day, we have to think about how we get to own the life we're creating around ourselves regardless. And I think that's
yeah.
something I've been so inspired to see your career because in some ways, maybe a great way to say this is that you decentered you decentered mm, whether it's you decentered the corporate world to
Mm,
create for
mhm,
yourself, to put yourself at the center, and
mhm.
then propagate what you have learned from all those experiences prior, to propagate what you've learned and to give others the gift of, frankly, liberating themselves in all these different ways. I think, obviously, Myth and the Nice Girl, I feel like liberates people in ways of making them feel like, oh, I still can be myself and kind and not feel like I have to step into some other archetype that doesn't suit me or embrace the work, love your career. It's like I can envision how I want my life to be and what I love and what I don't love, and I can learn to actually love my career. Um, but it's by putting myself at the center of it and really knowing what it is that I care about in this work.
Right, and understanding that you have agency, that
Mhm.
you you have the power to make these decisions. No one else
Yeah.
is going to do it for you. And sometimes we make decisions that go against the grain where
Mm.
people, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times, like, even when I left Coca Cola, one of the world's most admired companies, to go to Movie Phone, this
Mm.
early stage startup.
Yeah.
But I went because it was the internet. It was the late 1990s and the internet was getting going, and I'm like, "I think there's something here." And everyone else, like, literally thought I was crazy because I could have stayed at Coke. I could have stayed on the track to get to CFO because that was the world
Mhm.
I was in at the time. Um, but I knew I didn't wanna stay in finance. I knew I wanted to run all aspects of a business. I wanted to be more of a GM, and I felt
Yeah.
like I had there was more likelihood that I would get there by going to a smaller company where I
Yeah.
could kind of get exposure to different areas within the company. So it's like it was a very
Mhm.
intentional decision.
Yeah.
Was it risky?
Yeah.
Sure, but it's like or even, like, when I was thinking about leaving media, corporate to go into startup investing, the way that I mitigated the risk was by saying, "You know what? Let me try this first as a side hustle." and see if
Yeah.
I like it before I go all in. I really do love the kind of try before you buy or
Yeah.
date, marry, or whatever analogy you wanna
Yeah.
I just I think when you can do that, it's so smart because it really does de-risk, right?
Yeah.
There's still an enormous amount of risk, but it mitigates the risk somewhat.
Absolutely. Well, you're kind of, and I think putting your innovation brain on, you're testing and learning your way through and creating space to see things as tests. A lot of times we put so much pressure on that career shift to be the right decision, but it might just be the right test, and that's
Yes.
okay.
And that's a
Um
big part of growth. Testing is a
yes.
big part of growth, right?
Yeah.
Experimenting. Like, I'm always, like, saying and now, I'm an entrepreneur. I wear lots of
Mhm.
different hats, and I'm always planting seeds. I feel like I'm always
Yeah.
like, "Let me try that and see if it
Yeah.
works." Like, is that something that I can scale, or is it a one-off? I think that
Mhm.
there's a pain point that I'm addressing. I think there's a market there, but maybe there isn't, like, it's and even with my books, it's having beta readers,
Yeah.
I ask people when they're reading with Embrace the Work, Love Your Career, I had a dozen, professional women that read that book. One of the questions that I asked them was to mark the spots where they get bored. Like, where am I losing
Mm.
them,
That's
and
such a
it's like
brilliant ask.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, where am I losing you? Because, okay, I need to relook at that and maybe tell a more engaging story or, but if you don't ask that question, right, you just don't know then. Like, so it's
Yeah.
this beta, the prototype, the tweaking, the iterating, which is very much the startup world, which we're both very
Yeah.
familiar with. I
Yeah.
think that is a big that mindset, that kind of startup
Mhm.
mindset I think can be really helpful when you're thinking about growing and
Yeah.
what growth looks like.
Yeah. I wanna go back to just another observation that I had about, you know, what it really sounds like happened when you started your family after the challenge of not starting a family in the traditional sense. And how quickly, first of all, one of my favorite things to see, I'm 41, so I've got a lot of friends who've become mothers in the last 10 years, and
Yeah.
watching people become mothers and how it transforms them is one of the most beautiful things to witness. And one of the things I think happens that I've observed is you might have thought you knew your values before, but when you bring kids into the world, your values start becoming even more clear. And the way that you then look at your time is different. And so as you were talking through kind of evaluating and looking at what do you really love, it it just to me felt like you were going through the process of what when you have a clearly defined value system, this is what
Yeah.
happens. You seeing your time differently. You start seeing
Yeah.
that that the way that you want to show up and spend every minute of every day has to be aligned in order for you to feel fulfilled as a human.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that
Yeah.
resonates with you.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that brings up for me. The first is, which I didn't mention this when I was sharing the story, is that I did go to Time Inc. to see if they would be willing to work with me and give me even 1 day a week that I could work from home.
Mhm.
And that flexibility wasn't available to me. They were very worried because I was one of the senior most um, females at the company.
Yeah.
They were worried that if they did that for me, it was the precedent, right? That and this was a
Yeah.
very different time. I mean, just
Yeah.
think about everything that's happened with COVID. I mean, like
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
almost feels like, yeah, it feels surreal for me to even be saying this, but I
Yeah.
did try, right? And I wasn't able to make that work. So because I really
Mm.
loved working a time,
Sure.
I loved it. Um, in terms of values and figuring out how to spend your time, it was life-changing for me when we after we adopted our first son, I took my 3 months maternity leave, and I went back to work, and what I realized was that the way that I used to work was no longer going to work for me.
Mm,
So, for example, like, I've always been such a perfectionist. I had, like, these people-pleasing tendencies, like, I had to let go of both of those things, and I
yeah.
really mean it. Like, I made, like, major changes in my in the way that I approached work, like, just as, like, as an example, even if it was just a weekly update that I would send to senior
Mm,
management, I always spent so much time making it look beautiful,
mm,
and I just stopped doing that. I really made it
yeah,
more about content than the form. You know, it was
yeah,
it was really about, like, here's what you need to know. Or
yeah,
instead of creating, a slide deck to pitch an idea to my boss, which would take me hours and hours and hours, I literally would just, like, I would just jot down a few of the most important things that I wanted to express to her, and I would have a conversation with her about it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
these are, like, big things, or even
yeah.
I had 8 direct reports at the time, they each ran a department.
Mhm.
I was having weekly one-on-one meetings with them, 1 hour each, so it was
Mm,
8 hours out of my week, and what I
wow.
realized was that they weren't even, like, really effective meetings because they were just going through their to-do lists with me, and
Yeah, yeah,
I canceled all of them, and instead I did one, group meeting with the 8 of them, and I said to them, "Look, if you have a big opportunity you wanna talk to me about or, like, a big obstacle, get on my calendar for 20 minutes, and we can just, like, really focus on that."
yeah,
And, like, that
yeah,
cleared up so much time on my calendar. So,
yeah.
it's really amazing that it took for me, it took
Mm,
having this baby to
yeah,
just kind of take a look at, like, how I was working and how could I be smarter about how I was
yeah,
time,
yeah,
That was, like,
yeah,
a huge deal for me, and it freed up a lot of time, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about the one of the things I'm working on with my therapist is perfectionism for sure. That's like
Yeah,
I'm a recovering perfectionist. But it is interesting how you have this big life change and you realize perfection doesn't work here. Like this isn't it. I can still do a great job without without holding myself to some standard that only I'm holding myself to.
yeah,
No one else is actually holding me to
yeah,
that standard.
that's right,
Um,
that's
and
right.
that you can make that adjustment. And again, still take care of your people, take care of your work, do all the things, but also free up time, space, and mental, emotional energy for your family. And frankly, also for yourself, because
Yeah,
I'm sure you have to learn how to take care of yourself in a totally different way when you're in that phase of
yeah,
life.
and I'll tell you, that was the first time in my life that I actually hired an executive coach to work with me
Mhm.
after I came back from maternity leave, because I was drowning. Like, I was literally I just remember I was I was so I was feeling so vulnerable, like, I was feeling like I wanted to show everybody at work that I could
Mm,
still be as effective as I was um, you know, before the baby, and
yeah.
I was saying yes to everything. Like, anything that anybody asked me, I was like, "Yeah, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, I can do." And I literally was like, "No, I can't." And there was just a point where I was
Wow.
like, "This is not working," and I found a great executive coach who worked with me for, gosh, I wanna say probably even after I left time, probably, like, I was with her for 4 or 5 years. So just knowing that there are these experts that are out there
Yeah.
that can be helpful, like, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach, whether, like, you don't have to do it alone, and
Yeah.
I really believe that because, um I think it's, like, really hard sometimes for people. I don't know if it's just hard to admit that they need help or if it's just almost like they feel so overwhelmed that even the thought of now starting a process of looking for the right person to help them
Mhm.
is so
Yeah.
overwhelming, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that was also just really game changing for me, the
I
coach
think that is
or
brilliant. I really think that is brilliant, and whether people listening are in executive roles or not, the idea of especially obviously, I'm child-free by choice, but if I think it's so brilliant to think when you have had a big life change, you need support. It's as simple
yeah,
as that.
regardless of what it
It's
is.
just
Right.
regardless of
I
what it is, how even when I started this business, you know, there was part of me that was like, "Okay, get you." I could have gotten very conservative with my spending and thought, "Don't, you're starting this
mm,
business, you don't know what's gonna happen, don't spend all your money on this." But I made a commitment to myself that I was gonna double down on self-care because I thought, and listen, I have a fleet of healers and special people in my life, from a therapist to a wise woman who
mhm,
I speak to every 2 weeks, like, to my Reiki gal. I do so many
love
things to
it.
take care of myself, um, but it was because I knew this is gonna test my mental strength in ways that I've just never had to do before. I've never felt that intensity, and
True.
I need more support. So I can't imagine, having a child and learning to adjust to this whole new life of raising another human being and continuing to raise yourself and be in work and raise your team, without saying, "Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna bring on some extra help to support
It
me in this process." It's so smart. It makes so much sense.
well, stress is inherent in change,
Mm,
right? So whenever we're going through a change, big change, small change, medium-sized
yeah,
change, like, we are going through stress. It might be
yeah,
physical, it might be emotional, it might be mental, but it's stress. So,
yeah,
acknowledging that and, like, how are you like, I love the fact, Sharia, that you did that. You're like, "I'm starting this new business. This is
yeah.
stressful." Like, I need to double down on taking care of myself, not, like, pull back
Yeah,
on it. So,
yeah,
it's and I so much of that too is, like, awareness and
mhm,
intentionality and getting out of that, like, autopilot mode, but really being
yeah,
able to take a step back and say, "Okay, this is a big deal. So,
yeah,
how am I gonna set myself up for this transition, for it to
yeah,
go smoothly, for it to be successful? Like, what does that look like as opposed to just
yeah.
going with it?"
Well, and I imagine too, I think of my friends who are moms, there's this pressure often that they think they're supposed to be able to do it on their own. Like, they think
Yeah,
that, there's so much I notice so much pressure when, for many more years than this small little set of years we're in. We raised our families in community, totally
mm,
different from the way we have functioned now.
yep,
And I do think when we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to raise, we're still children. Like, it takes a village for us to be all raising ourselves up, and
yeah. Well
growing from here to there. Yeah.
I have to tell you literally just before I got on with you, um, a friend of mine, her daughter is really close with my son. They're the 7th graders. She texted me and 2 other parents,
Mm,
and said, "School starting next week. I wanna start a study club for the 4 of them where they get
mm,
together once a week. I'll organize it. They can come to my house. There's gonna be no phones. They're gonna sit, they're gonna do their homework together, they're gonna help each other."
mm.
And I it was literally the best thing that's happened all day, other than seeing you, Sharia, but, like, seriously, like,
That's so great. Yeah.
it made me feel so supported. It made me feel like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." Like, the fact that she is taking this on. Not only did
Yeah.
she come up with the idea, but she is going to make it happen. Because you know how many times it's like somebody will throw out an idea, but then
Yeah.
so but it's on somebody else to kind of raise their hand and say, "Okay, I'll execute
Yeah.
on it." Like,
Yeah.
she came up with an idea, she's gonna organize it, and it's gonna be amazing for our kids, and
Amazing.
it was just amazing, and it goes back to, like, this idea of community,
Yeah.
and really just just being there for each other
Yeah.
um, as parents. I do My friend Ron, I remember, when Anthony was born, when my oldest was born, he gave me such good advice. He said, "Fran, like, at home, you're gonna need a lot of extra help, and
Mm,
one of the things to think about is, can you set your home life up in a way where you're spending as much time as possible with Anthony, and you're bringing people in to help with other stuff, with the
mm,
cleaning, with doing
mm,
laundry, with." And I was
mhm.
like, "That's so smart." Even, like,
Yeah.
if you need somebody to, like, cook meals, especially in the beginning, like, when they're
Yeah.
babies, people and
Yeah.
it was just sort of it was interesting to hear that because I was so focused on, like, a nanny, and
Mm.
I had somebody, helping me with
Yeah.
Anthony. But what was even more important was, could I find people that can help with other things so that I could actually spend time with him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Again, like, you're building that village and that
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's as best as we can spend the resources that we have wisely. And
Yeah.
again, I think I love the idea of there's having your a community member essentially reach out to say, "This is something that I wanna do," how it relieves something for you, and guaranteed
Oh,
that that that's an exchange. There's gonna be something else down the line that you do that helps alleviate
yes.
some of that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
exchange that I think we need,
Yeah.
and our kids need it, like, that kind of network, that kind of community that's looking out for one another is so, so important. So
Yes.
I love that so much. I, I would I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
just a reality, but I do wanna get into rapid fire. Actually, I'm gonna say one more thing before I get into rapid fire. We haven't talked at all really about Bookbound, and I do think one of the things that I love about what I'm seeing you do with helping women get published and, uh, helping women get published, helping women understand the process, all of these things, you're building community there, and
Mm.
that's been a really beautiful thing to see because, again, in a space where I think people feel alone a lot of times. I know I working on this first book
Oh
that
my
I've been
gosh.
trying to write. It's the most lonely experience I've ever had
Lonely.
in my
Oh,
life.
so
So, I
lonely.
think so I do think, um, I guess this is just kind of a plug if anyone is in that boat, has been thinking of wanting to write a book, uh, the work that you've been doing with Bookbound Co. is so cool, and I think it's building community around this space that really needs some clarity where there is very little, and community where there is none. So,
Oh,
yeah,
thank you. I've been loving it. It's been so much fun, and I really love helping women see that there's so many different ways to get a book published.
yeah,
The book publishing industry can be a bit opaque, so even just, like, demystifying it, and then
mhm,
so there's, like, that's, like, the business side, and then the creative side of, like, okay, let's get really clear on what the book is. Like, what is the
yeah,
concept, and how is it gonna stand out in, a very crowded market? So,
yeah,
again, I feel like I bring a lot of um,
mhm,
my startup experience into this because it's like, if you think about a startup, right, you're thinking about market, founder, product. And
mm,
with a book, you're thinking about market, author, and product. The book is a product.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's been really fun to take a lot of what I've learned in the startup
yeah.
world and bring it into the book publishing world, and I've been really enjoying it. So thank you for bringing it up.
Oh my gosh, of course, and the podcast is amazing too, so
Thank
obviously, I'm
you.
gonna say all this on the front end, but I just wanted to say that because that's been something that I've really loved seeing is the community you're building around that work, so,
Yeah.
um, well, I'd love to get into these rapid fire questions, and, then we'll close this out, but
Amazing.
let's start okay, so let's start with number
Okay.
1. Fill in the blank. Growth is
A story without an ending.
oh my gosh, Fran, that's so good.
Good.
Mm, it's
I
really good. What
had to
what
come up
was
with
the
something good for you, Cheria.
well,
I had
you
to come up
did. That was beautiful. That was perfect. Um, what was the very first thing you realized you were good at? And I'm talking like childhood, the very first
childhood.
thing you realized you were good at.
Yeah, so clear to me, reading. Reading. And I'm still because that's what I picture myself sitting on my bedroom floor with my back up against my bed, engrossed in a book. And reading is a big part of learning, right? So,
Yeah,
I'm still such a voracious reader that is always the first kind of memory that pops into my head when I think about my childhood.
that's so good. I love that. What was your first job?
So, I think I might have told you this in the past, but when I was in 1st grade, I was the bookkeeper for my dad's landscaping business. So, I
Oh,
did because my parents were, they're
yeah.
Italian immigrants.
Yeah.
So I did everything for him at a very, very young age.
Oh my gosh, that is
Right.
amazing. What's something you're trying to learn right now?
I'm actually, really working hard to become more fluent in Italian. So, I've been doing Duolingo, which I'm obsessed with. I'm, like, on a 360 something day streak. Um,
Amazing.
that's like, just a few minutes a day, which is such a
Yeah.
great way to learn, um, because I grew up speaking Italian, but it was our dialect. There's like 1,000
Yeah.
dialects in Italy.
Yeah.
So, I've really been working hard to learn, like, the standard Italian.
Very cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing. What's something you're trying to unlearn?
Oh gosh, this is a big one. Measuring my success as a parent by how happy my kids are.
Mm,
I'm really trying to unlearn that because instead, I'd really like for it to be about how well can they regulate themselves when they're not happy? Because
mm.
we're not happy all the time. Life is ups and
Yeah.
down. So being able to self-regulate when you're in those moments of sadness or, whatever the feeling is, that's been a big shift for me because I feel like when they were younger, it was just all about like, I just want them to be happy
Yeah.
when that's not
Yeah.
realistic.
That's
That's a
such a
big
good
shift.
one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
That's a
Yeah.
big one. I'm sure parents out there are gonna be like, "Woof, that's good. That's good." Name a book. I'm sure it's gonna be a book or a movie, that changed your life.
It's a book, as you guessed, and it's The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. It's
Okay.
a book I read many, many, many years ago, and it really got me thinking about money and values, and it
Mhm.
launched a very active nonprofit, um, part of my life.
Wow.
So it just helped me be really intentional about the causes that I wanted to volunteer for and donate money to. Um, it really had a profound impact on my life. The Soul of
That's
Money by
great.
Lynn Twerk. Yeah.
That is great. When growth feels good, how do you
Mhm.
celebrate?
I have to say, I mean, and this is the truth, I love splurging on something really fun for myself that, like, I
Nice.
wouldn't normally buy for myself,
Yeah.
because it just feels like, "Okay, I deserve it," you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it's fun.
I love that. When growth feels difficult or hard, how do you take care of yourself?
Oh gosh, I definitely call in the troops, like, I have a few
Mm,
people in my life that are just they're such great listeners and they know me so well, and for me, even just being able to, like, verbalize, what
yeah.
I'm struggling with, just being able to, like, say the words out loud, it is so helpful to me. It's almost like the person that I'm talking to is now carrying the load for me.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
that's a big one for me is just having, like, somebody who I can talk to about it, who can listen, and who can tell me it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. The last one is when you grow all the way up and out of this life,
Mm.
what will you congratulate yourself on?
Making a positive impact on the people that I love and on the world at large.
Mm,
Like, for me, it's always about impact, It's the way
yeah.
that I've always, it's just the way that I've always thought about, like, the contribution that I wanna make. Like, am I making a positive impact? Am I changing this person's life for the better?
Mhm,
Am I
mhm.
doing something like, even whether it's with my kids or whether it's writing a book that's read by many, many, many women, it's
Yeah,
it's impact. It's all about impact for me.
yeah. Well, you've had so much of an impact on me. I'm so
Mm.
grateful, and I know that you will have so much more impact over the many, many years of your life, and I can't wait to see where you grow from here. And thank you so much for being with me today and sharing space. You're the absolute best, and I'm so grateful to share this life with you. Thank you for being in my life.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for being in my life. I loved, 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 loved this time with you. So thank you.
Mm, all right. Well, till next time, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a good one.